staff.
Okay, that brings us to item 15A. Now, this next item is the substantial issue hearing for an appeal of a local CDP approved by the City of Redondo Beach for a large 36-acre, 500,000 plus square foot commercial redevelopment project in the City of Redondo Beach's King Harbor. The applicant is the City of Redondo Beach and the Redondo Beach Waterfront LLC. There are 17 different appellants listed on the cover page of the staff report, which include a mix of both several local residents, 2 local city council members, and multiple organizations. Next slide, please. As shown on this slide, the project is located within the Redondo Beach King Harbor. The landside portion of the project is within the city's LCP jurisdiction. However, a portion of the project is also located within the Commission's retained coastal CDP jurisdiction and thus will require a separate coastal permit from the Commission as well. The action before the Commission today is only in regard to the appeal of the city-approved CDP for this project. Next slide. Specifically, the project is for the redevelopment of the 36-acre portion of the harbor shown here on this slide, with a large commercial redevelopment involving demolition of approximately 200,000 square feet of existing facilities and 2,192 parking spaces, and construction of more than 460,000 square feet of new development with a range of commercial uses such as retail shops, a movie theater, a high-end hotel, and these structures would vary in height between 33 and 64 feet. The 2 new 63-foot high 5-level parking garage structures would be located on site as well. And the project also includes the permanent opening of the harbor's designated existing swimming lagoon to tidal action. It also includes removal of an existing hand-launch pier, new public access improvements, reconfiguration of the existing bicycle path, construction of a new pedestrian pathway along the waterfront, a drawbridge for pedestrian access, removal and replacement of approximately 61 boat slips, although there would be an additional boat slip that would be lost. And the project includes the exchange of tidelands where Basin 3 would become public and a portion of the sandy beach would become private. The primary issues raised by the appellants are that the proposed project is inconsistent with the policies of the certified LCP, because land available for coastal dependent land uses within the harbor area would be displaced by non-coastal dependent development. The calculation that the city used to determine the amount of development square footage for the commercial development is inconsistent with the development cap for the site in the city's land use plan and the scale of the existing development, in part because the size of the parking structures are not included. I would just note, as I mentioned, there was a portion of the project that involves that trade of land, and when I said that a portion of the beach would become private, it would be controlled by the private developer, but made available for public use, with the exception for private events. Now, the other assertions of the appellants are that the project would fail to protect lower-cost visitor-serving uses and recreational facilities, would not provide for the appropriate mix of harbor-related and visitor-serving recreational uses within the harbor, and that the proposed hotel would not serve to provide for lower-cost overnight accommodations. They also assert the public scenic coastal views from the first public road along the shoreline, North Harbor Drive, and from other public viewing areas, including Zoolager Park across the street from the site on the landward side, would be adversely impacted. That the project would result in the loss of boat slips, inconsistent with specific policies of the LCP that require that no boat slips be removed. And that the project would result in the displacement of public parking necessary to support harbor-related and dependent uses, including parking for boaters and fishing, and that the new parking fees within these new structures may be unaffordable because the city CDP did not address through their conditions or findings what the range of costs would be, and that new parking would be controlled by the concessionaire or the developer. Finally, the appellants also contend that the project is not consistent with the public access and recreation policy of the Coastal Act because it would fail to protect recreational and coastal areas for water-oriented activities due to the project's removal of a hand launch and would potentially privatize and develop a portion of the sandy beach with commercial development. Now, in addition, although not part of the grounds for appeal, I would note that Measure C, a voter initiative, was recently approved by the local residents, and the intent of this was to amend the Certified Local Coastal Program and prevent or modify the development that would be allowed within Seaside Lagoon and on this site. The primary points of that measure are to preserve existing harbor views, impose design and safety requirements on the development of the public boat launch ramp that is related to this project, protect public parking, and clarify the development cap of the harbor. Now, clearly, a majority of the voters in Redondo Beach have significant concerns regarding the project, and the initiative was passed in response to the city's approval of this development. However, I would also note that the initiative would not become incorporated as part of the city's certified LCP or as a standard of review for a coastal permit within the city until it is first certified by the Commission pursuant to an amendment to the LCP itself. The city has not yet submitted that amendment application to us, and the provisions of the recently approved voter initiative therefore do not affect the standard of review or constitute grounds for appeal of the CDP that is before the Commission today. We are in discussions with the city. It's my preliminary understanding that the city intends to submit that LCP amendment application to us for our review. There was the view of many of the proponents of that initiative that no formal LCP amendment would be required, that it should be effective immediately upon passage. Our staff, of course, disagrees with that. So I just wanted to keep that in mind, although not grounds for the appeal. This is obviously a very controversial project, and there's a lot going on here in the bones of this. Now, I'd also note that one of the contentions of the appeal is that the development cap would be exceeded. I would note that the project involves the demolition of approximately 200,000 square feet of existing development and the construction of 500,000 square feet of new development. That would result in a net increase of about 300,000+ square feet. That would comply with the cap on development in the city's harbor. The appellant's concern, though, is that these new parking structures, which are large, were not included within the square footage for the new development. And the wording of the LCP specifically discusses floor area in the cap, but there's some ambiguity within the policy regarding whether or not the parking garages should be included within the cap. We do believe that that raises a substantial question, though, in regards to the city's action, and that additional findings should be made regarding this. In addition, the appellants note that the project would result in the loss of boat slips, which is inconsistent with Recreation Policy 3 of the Certified LUP, which provides that all existing boating and related facilities be maintained. Now, although the project itself would only result in the loss of one boat slip directly on the site, the city did not adequately address the project's inconsistency with this policy and their findings. And I would also note that although the loss of one boat slip would seem minor in the context of the 61 existing boat slips in Basin 3 or the number of slips overall in the harbor, however, the appellants have also noted correctly that the project that is the subject of this appeal is integrally related to the boat launch project that is the subject of a separate second appeal that we will be hearing after this item today. And that project will result in the loss of additional slips. Next slide, please. On that matter, I would note that Policy 1 of the Certified LUP specifically provides that no new development projects, such as this project within the harbor, may proceed before construction of a public boat launch ramp. The boat launch ramp, which is shown on this slide down towards the bottom left-hand corner in that red circle, is located at a completely different location in the harbor, but that project would result in the loss of 38 existing boat slips. Although that boat launch ramp was processed as a separate application by the city, the appellants note that the subject site where the new commercial development project that is the subject of this appeal is located is one of the potential alternative locations for that boat launch ramp to be located. So we do agree with the appellants that there is a relation between these two projects, and the issues of the loss of the boat slips is an appropriate question to ask. Now, in addition, the LCP requires both preservation of existing views from Harbor Drive and the establishment of view corridors from Harbor Drive. The appellants assert that these views would be adversely impacted and blocked. The scale of this development would be 3 or more stories in many areas. It would obviously affect views from the street. The project has been designed with some view corridors, but we do believe that this issue requires some additional review and should be looked at more closely. And according to both the Coastal Act and Land Use Plan Policy 15, I would note that lower cost accommodations must be provided in new hotel projects unless it is determined to be infeasible. However, in this case, the city's findings did not include an adequate analysis of whether it would be feasible to provide lower cost accommodations on this site. The city failed to require any, in addition, there is a hotel that was approved as part of this project, but the city failed to require any clear or defined mitigation in the form of an in lieu fee for the approved high-cost hotel as specifically required by the LCP, or even have adequate findings regarding whether or not the provision of a lower-cost hotel was feasible. They did have a condition that it really just stated that if the hotel were to be high cost, then they would need to participate in an in lieu fee program, but it really did not have, we do not believe, had that adequate level of specificity that would be an enforceable condition. Thus, as approved, the city project does raise substantial questions regarding this issue of lower cost accommodations. And there is also the issue of the appellant's assertion that the parking may not be affordable. The city's permit did not adequately address the parking rates or explain how the parking system would work. Currently, the city contracts with various parking concessionaires. Those contracts must be approved by the city, and that includes parking rates. Here, the concession for the parking would permanently go to the developer of this new site, and there was no explanation of how this would work. These parking garages will serve as parking not only for the new commercial development, but it replaces the existing parking for much of the boating facilities. And there's going to be a shared use between those two user groups, between the commercial and the boaters within this harbor. So there's a lot of questions about, given that this is a multi-level structure, and how is this going to work with the harbor-related uses? So staff does believe that this question is raised and bears further review. The appellants also note that the project involves the removal of approximately 1/3 of an existing sandy beach area known as Seaside Lagoon. In this photo, Seaside Lagoon is annotated with that little arrow. It has a rock revetment separating it from the water. It's that large sandy beach area. The city has a long tradition of filling that with to create a large chlorinated swimming pool. It's very popular each year. That's the historic use. This project would do away with that, remove some of that rock, and open it up to tidal influence and turn that area where the lagoon previously was more into a typical sandy beach, and then add some commercial uses that would ring that area. That's the area where the contention is that it would be privately controlled but made available for public use. But that is also an issue of this appeal, and we do believe that also bears further review. Now, I would note that more than 20 letters were received this week from members of the public, mostly in opposition to the project, but with some in support, and those have been included in the record and posted on the Commission's website as correspondence relating to this project. They were received after our addendums were finalized, but they are available for the record on our website. And next slide. In closing, I would just note that as approved by the city, we do believe the project raises substantial issue with regard to its conformity with the certified LCP and the Chapter 3 public access policies of the Coastal Act, and thus we're recommending today that the Commission find that the appeal raises substantial issue as to conformity with respect to the grounds on which the appeal has been filed. Now, clearly, this is an incredibly controversial project. It has a lot of interest from members of the public. I just want to note that I have met with several of the appellants and the project developer and their representatives just within the past 2 weeks. And I believe today, perhaps, may be the one, perhaps the only time that both sides are in agreement with each other regarding the staff recommendation here. And At least in the case of the developer, although I'm sure they would have preferred that we recommend no substantial issue, it's my understanding that given their understanding that this is a complex project and there's a related CDP application for development within the Commission's jurisdiction that must also be heard, and it makes sense to match those two applications up so that we can bring those back to you for your consideration at the same time in the future, that they do not oppose the recommendation today for substantial issue. And with that, I would just point out that unless 3 or more commissioners wish to hear additional arguments and testimony and vote on that question of substantial issue today, then substantial issue will be deemed to exist. If the commissioners do wish to hear additional arguments and vote, the motion to carry out that action would be found on page 7 of your staff reports. I would further note that the action before us today is only for the determination of whether a substantial issue is deemed to exist, and thus, if the Commission finds or determines substantial issue is deemed to exist, we will bring that de novo application back at a future time, at the same time that our intention is to bring that back at the same time with the related CDP application and the related CDP application for the boat launch ramp together, so that you can have this entire project before you at the same time. So that concludes my presentation. I am available for any questions.
Thank you very much. Do we have ex partes?
Non-ex parte, Chair.
Ex partes? Vice Chair? Turnbull Sanders. Excuse me.
Okay. On May 8th at approximately 12 p.m., I had an ex parte communication with Bill Brand. I received an initial request, which I'm just going to read into the record. He stated that he's one of the appellants on both of the above, both of the projects, 15A and 15B, that seek the determination of substantial issue and require a de novo hearing by the Coastal Commission. As a former council member in the district for 8 years and the newly elected mayor, I would appreciate the honor of meeting with you personally. We did by phone. He stated also that he wanted to discuss why he agreed wholeheartedly with the staff that there are multiple substantial issues that require a full hearing of both of the projects. In addition to these appeals, a citizen-led initiative was approved on March 7th by 57 Measure C that further limits development in this area and places specific minimum requirements for public use of a new launch facility. The city will soon be transmitting those amendments of our LIP and LCP to the Commission for certification, and he wanted to brief me on that. Mayor Brand also mentioned that there was a lot of opposition to the project and that the project as conceived violates the local coastal program and builds on park space and impacts public views, and that he agreed with staff's assessment that there is a substantial issue. I also received a request for an ex parte from Dean Francois of the Sierra Club. I did not have an opportunity to speak with him, but he also supported substantial issue finding.
Okay, Commissioner Howell?
Thank you, Chair Boschko. I just had a quick question for Executive Director Jack Ainsworth. Have you gotten anything in the mail from Redondo?
Anything in the mail? I'm not sure. I'd have to ask Steve. Do we have anything in the mail from Redondo?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay, so we are not in receipt of a copy of the results from the election that was allegedly sent to us?
I'm not aware of that.
I can't confirm if we received the results, but they have had a recent election. One of the seats, my understanding, is still in contention. They're recounting the votes, but I can't say that the makeup of the City Council that voted on this project has yet significantly changed.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so any more ex partes? Seeing none, do I have 3 or more commissioners who would like to have a hearing on the issue of finding substantial issue? Seeing no hands, we find substantial issue.
Thank you. And if we could bring up the PowerPoint presentation for 15B. Item 15B is next. This is the substantial issue for an appeal of a local CDP approved by the City of Redondo Beach for construction of a new public boat launch ramp and boat hoist, also in the Redondo Beach King Harbor. This is the project I just mentioned. It has some relationship to the appeal we just heard. The applicant is the city. There are 8 appellants, many of which were the same appellants for the item that we just heard. Next slide, please. Now, it's located on an area of the harbor known as Mole B. It currently contains a public parking lot for the marina, a public park known as Moonstone Park, the harbor patrol facility, and within that park is also areas where the public, the Outrigger Canoe Club is located and where they store their boats. I would also note that it appears that all portions of the approved development would occur within the Commission's retained jurisdiction. Now, this is important because it affects the city's action here. At early meetings with city staff, it wasn't clear if the project would occur entirely within our retained permit jurisdiction because it included improvements within the parking lot. However, at this point, it appears that the entire project is located within the Commission's retained permit jurisdiction, not within the city's permit jurisdiction. That wasn't raised as one of the grounds for appeal, but I'd just like to note that here. But we do believe that this substantial issue is necessary, if only to address this issue, that the city has submitted a related coastal development permit application to us, acknowledging that at least a portion of this project is within our retained permit jurisdiction. So again, similar to the last project, there will be 2 separate CDPs. There's the city's CDP, and there will be our CDP for the portion within our jurisdiction. Next slide, please. Now, in addition to that jurisdictional issue I noted, there are other issues with this project raising substantial question regarding its consistency with the LCP. The primary issues raised by the several appellants are that the project would result in adverse impacts to public access, recreation and boating facilities, public parking, traffic circulation within the harbor, in part because it would cluster too many coastal dependent uses within an area that they consider to be too densely used already on that Mole B. It would also result in the loss of some of those parking spaces as you reconfigure some of that for the use of the boat launch ramp. It would result in the loss of some of that public park space. There is a policy within the LCP that specifically requires that 33% of Mole B be maintained as park, and that raises a substantial question regarding whether or not that is still the case. And the city has hinged their analysis on what is the definition of open space, and they've included the parking spaces as part of that definition on the logic that the parking spaces are serving the park use. We do believe that raises a fair question, though, and bears further analysis. There's also the question that the boat launch ramp would remove 38 existing boat slips. Now, there's a trade-off there for the boat launch ramp, of course, which Commission staff supports. I just note the boat launch ramp, that was a suggested modification that we added years ago to the LCP, and the requirement is that the city must come in with a boat launch project before any new substantial redevelopment projects can occur. There was good reason for that. We want it to occur, but the questions are, is in the right location, the right design. Next slide, please. Specifically in regard to the loss of existing public parking facilities within the harbor, there's an Access Policy 9 specifically states that there should be no loss of parking. And this project does raise substantial issue with that very specific policy, as well as with the policy that states no loss of boat slips. The city's report did not include adequate findings to address these potential impacts, and we do believe that that raises a substantial question regarding consistency. With that, I'm just going to cut this a little short today and mention that I would also note that the action before the Commission today is only for the determination of whether substantial issue exists. If substantial issue is found to exist, then we will intend to bring this the de novo permit action back at a future hearing at the same time that we bring back the CDP for the development with our jurisdiction. And as I mentioned in the last item, logically, I think we would want to bring that back with the other permit applications for the commercial redevelopment project at the same time so that you would have all that before you. Unless three or more commissioners wish to hear additional arguments and testimony and vote on substantial issue question, then substantial issue is deemed to exist. If the commissioners wish to hear additional arguments and vote on this matter, the motion to carry out that action is found on page 5 of your staff reports. We are recommending that you find the appeal raises a substantial issue as to conformity with respect to the grounds on which the appeal has been filed. And with that, I'll conclude the staff presentation and just note that I am available for questions.
Thank you very much. Any ex partes on this matter?
Yes.
Yes, Vice Chair Turnbull Sanders.
Thank you, Chair Boschko. As was mentioned in the prior matter on the 8th of May at approximately 12 p.m., I had an ex parte with Mayor Bill Brand. The substance of the discussion was substantially similar as was had on the prior item, and that Mayor Brand is supporting substantial issue finding on this matter as well.
All right, anyone else? Do I have 3 or more commissioners who would like to have a hearing on substantial issue? Seeing no commissioners want to have a hearing, we do find substantial issue. Okay. 15C.
Okay, if we could bring up the PowerPoint presentation for
Joy Corradetti. Okay, the last one.
And I was waiting too.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, and thank you so much for hearing me. That was an extra item here. Actually, we have a busload of people that came from Redondo Beach. So can I ask my fellow Redondo Beach people to stand up back there? You see us with the turquoise shirts. And we don't want to take very much of your time because we know this isn't the forum for us to speak about the Redondo Beach issue of A and B. But what we do want to say is we wanted to stand up and be counted. My name is Joy Corradetti. I'm a 29-year resident of Redondo Beach, and I also own a gift shop on the International Boardwalk called Mystical Joy. And the reason, I'm before you is because that particular gift shop is on the property in question. There are a lot of people in Redondo Beach, including my fellow people over here, that we totally support the Center Cal project for the Project A and the boat ramp B. So at another forum, we will stand up and be counted. We will, speak our piece and let you know how we feel. But we just wanted to let you know that we're here today to say we really totally support the Redondo Beach waterfront and the Center Cal project. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and thank you for coordinating your presentation. That's very helpful and very effective.